Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to a very special online event today. It's called Remote Viewing for Transcending Space and Time. Explore where thoughts come from to access the infinite mind. My name is Stephen Dyna. I'm the founder and president of the Shift Network, and I'm really thrilled to be with you here today because one of the early explorations I had of the whole consciousness field and psychic phenomena was around remote viewing. We used to create these think tank conferences at Esalen, and Russell Targ was there. And we're going to get to explore with one of the pioneers in the world today who worked closely with Russell Targ and has really been at the forefront of taking some of the advanced research on remote viewing and turning it into protocols that can really be applied in our lives to better our lives in different ways. His name is Alan Steinfeld. He's the author of Making Contact. He's a prolific interviewer and host of New Realities, and also just a really great guy. So Alan, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Always good to see you, Stephen, and great work that the Shift Network is doing. Thank you.
Great. Well, we're going to dive in for this hour, and I also want to let everyone know that we have a full new course with Alan called Transcend Time and Space with Remote Viewing that we'll share more about towards the end of the hour. So, Alan, let's start with a little bit about your journey. I mean, you've definitely gone down a lot of rabbit holes in your day, and but what propelled you on this path, particularly focusing on remote viewing and what could open up there?
Well, all those rabbit holes are connected to some deep underground network there. And so I love to explore consciousness. That's how I got into this whole thing. I met someone channeling or a medium or my own out-of-body experiences. So I had a chance to meet Russell Targ, and I knew he was one of the founders of the Stanford Research Institute remote viewing practice. And I was interviewing him for my interview show, New Realities, and he said, "How would you like to do this and learn this right on camera here?" And I did, and I actually got the target, and I didn't know how I got it. I don't know how this information came into me, but it set me on a path. Like, how does awareness come into this brain? And so the discovery and the evolution of my understanding of consciousness is that it's not localized. Who we are, and we're part of the infinite field. And we have that awareness, and the old mechanistic, materialistic way of looking at the human body and brain is that we're very contained in this little skin box. And I found out teaching remote viewing around the world that this is not true. Everyone can do it. Everyone has access to the quantum field, if you want to call it that.
Cool. Well, it's a great place to start. And maybe for people who have less experience with remote viewing as a concept, maybe share a little bit about what differentiates that from other kinds of psychic information that might be non-local.
Right. Well, first off, remote viewing was a protocol developed by the Stanford Research Institute for the CIA and other government agencies. And they did this because they found out that the Russians had a psychic spying program. And so the CIA, these government organizations, say we can't let the Russians do anything that we don't do. So they called on Hal Puthoff and Ingo Swann, who was a great psychic, and he developed a particular protocol for tapping into this expansion of the mind. And so what makes it different than psychic awareness or mediumship or any other the modalities that use this kind of overview of consciousness, that you actually follow particular steps in order to connect with what they call the target or the remote viewing object or the place or the time. So what Ingo Swann laid out are steps. I can name them. You go through, you clear your mind, of course, you drop out of the ego personality, and you set your intention on where on this object you call the target, which is the thing you want to remote view. That could be a people, place, things, times, or events. And with that intention, that's all you do. You sit back and you let yourself receive. That's the miracle here. That's like, and I can go into left and right brain. Your left brain is always sending it out, but your right brain, the intuitive part, is always receiving. and it's receiving all the information from the field. And when you direct your focus to a particular place, that intent, or what they call the signal of that object, comes in, and you can, if you get out of the way enough, you will receive the exact target that your intention was set on. Is that clear? Did that make sense?
And so the viewing part of this is that you're not just trying to get the information, you're actually trying to kind of have a mental picture of what of the target, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's about receiving the mental picture, but it's not always a picture. Sometimes in my classes, people smell things, they hear things. It's actually more than viewing. It is a full body practice. It's like your whole vehicle is an instrument of knowing, of pure gnosis. And you can explain this with logical thinking. Logical thinking just gets you in a limited space. Well, I compare it to, okay, you have a computer, right? Your computer has local information you put there. But if you didn't know there was an internet, and I told you, look, I can get information that's not on my local computer, you would think that's impossible until you realize these other applications of consciousness. So I call consciousness an application, an app. And when you tune into non-local awareness by letting go of your ego personality, basically, what you think you know, that's the left brain. The left brain only thinks it knows something. The right brain is the gnosis. It's the pure knowing. So the key is to tap into that awareness and get away from this localized way of thinking. And we're always connected to that. That's the thing I found. You know, the left brain is the logical, intuitive, makes sense of the world. It always wants to know where you are and what's happening. But the right brain is getting this feed of intuition, of dreams, of creativity. And you know what? That is always flowing into us, but our left brain makes such a loud noise, we don't notice it. But those dream states, when I studied with the Aborigines told me about dream time, and they said, that is our religion. The ability for the mind to transcend the local environment and tap into, they didn't call it the universal field, but tap into this world that's always feeding us. It's always feeding us into information, and we have to learn how to receive it. So what remote viewing does is set an intention to receive a particular frequency in that field. And you just sit back, relax, and you look for the surprising thing. That's one of the keys. The surprising thing that pops into your awareness, because it's not the thing that's recycling all the time in the monkey mind.
It might be great to have a few examples, maybe your own target that you got correct, or some other really famous ones to sort of demonstrate what's possible.
All right. Well, some of the practice that we're doing in more of the advanced levels of the course is to do an event, right? So usually I clear my mind, and this friend who was testing me says, okay. And sometimes you don't give a clue. You don't want to give a clue. But in this case, I heard it was an event. So when I close my eyes and someone has a target in mind, I clear all the noise of what I've been thinking about that day. And so I dropped into that space with my intent. It's like setting a GPS. All you have to do is set that intent on the signal, not the noise, which is the stuff you're usually thinking about. And when you clear your mind, I got an image of a woman dressed in like turn of the century clothing, you know, out on a field, looking at some water. And it looked like early 1900s. And I said to myself, okay, I'm looking at this scene, but there's no event there. And then when I asked, okay, show me the event, I started to see this plane flying through the air. I just get these images. And I said, all right, it's a plane. It's early 1900s. Could it be the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk? And it was. I just picked that out. I put those pieces together because you will get fragments of the remote viewing target. And the idea is not to guess. And that was like, once you have all these fragments, and sometimes in these classes, people get this part and that part, and I put these fragments together and say, what do we got? But in that case, it's like I got a bullseye on that target. And that's something I don't encourage people to guess at. But once you have all those elements, then it's like, boom, you just get this information. And when you get a target like that right on, that's what I call a bullseye on the target, because boom, it's right there. But most of the time, we're getting fragments of images. So you might get this fragment of people in a field, or you might get this woman sitting there. But sometimes the whole impression comes in. So that's one little example.
That's an amazing example, and it also brings up an interesting point that we haven't really focused on. It's like, is remote viewing just as good for the past or the future as the present?
Well, if we are remote viewing with what I call the quantum mind, and what consciousness is, and you know very well from all the courses that you do, that consciousness is not localized in time and space, but it's framed in time and space, but we really are always tapped into everything, anywhere, all the time. So there is no structures of past and future. You can remote view the past. People are using it now for archaeological digs. They're finding out more that's happened there. Or they're using it, like Russell Targ did, to bet on the futures market, the silver futures market. And the closer you are to the present moment, it's easier to get that timeline. So you can, people looked at, there's a guy, Stephen Schwartz, who looks at 100 years into the future. He's been on Jeffrey Mishlev's show talking about that. So there's more of a chance to get your target right if it's the past and the future, because a big part of remote viewing is getting the feedback. So you get, when someone says, okay, there's this target, and you kind of do your drawings, you make your self-aware, and then you get the feedback and see where your mind has gone off into some little, what they call analytical overlays, where you've assumed something. And you also see what part of your awareness tapped into the actual signal of the target. So it's a kind of yoga of the mind, I call it, you know?
So I want to ask a little bit more about the history and before we go into the mechanism. So, so the CIA obviously was investing in this. They believed it was valid, that there was, the Russians were also exploring this as well. Probably a lot of the results of that are classified, but what things have you, anything that sort of is helpful for us to understand about how effective this was, or how much of a value add was it to do this work?
Well, there was one guy at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, named Pat Price, and he could read, and he was probably the best that there was, sealed documents inside a safe. So the safe was closed, and he could look into that safe and read classified documents. And that's an incredible skill. So that's one thing. He was then later recruited out of Stanford Research Institute directly into the CIA, and then who knows what happens. But they've discovered tanks that the Russians were building, certain locations when they were placing nuclear weapons. I think that's true. And then they would also find missing persons. You know, Russell Targ talks about a story when Patty Hearst was kidnapped, and the police came to him and said, "Can you find her?" And one of the people, I think it was Pat Price again, he says, "Yes, I can tell you where the car is, and show me a mugshot of suspects, and I'll tell you who it is." So this has practical application. Missing children, missing objects. Uri Geller would use it to look for gold. He was hired by mining companies to look for gold and precious metals on a map. He was given a map, and he goes, "Okay, dig there." I think he probably made a lot of money doing that.
So, so obviously there's a lot of applications, from futures market to gold to sort of spy functions. What do you find that the sort of average everyday student is most interested in applying remote viewing to?
Well, I think when you learn the skill, and you can learn it, you realize that you have an infinite mind, that you're not limited to time and space. So, well, let's say I use it when I go to a restaurant. I say, okay, if I order this, how is my body going to feel after I eat it? So it's a little more advanced than remote viewing. So I check in, and I see, okay, that's going to make me feel this way. This is going to make me feel that way. So you have a choice. It shows you have a choice in deciding how you want to move in the world. How does it feel to walk down this street or that street? It develops a keener intuition, a keener sense of where you need to be, what you need to work on. How else? You can also use it for looking at someone's body. I don't recommend this to diagnose, but sometimes I've done classes where if you can remote view targets, then you can look at someone's body and see, okay, where do they have pain? Where is something out? And they might not even know it, but the key is to notice what you notice. That is like the ultimate. So because our mind is picking up information all the time, we just don't focus it into that awareness. So a lot of practical information also is increased creativity. That's one of my favorite things, because if you're tapping into the flow of forever and you have an idea you want to work on, you make yourself available to new information, because this what do you call it, this cosmos, if you want to say, is always flowing into us. We are really present all the time with the flow of the quantum field. And if you make yourself aware of that and you sit down to write, you're going to get a feed based on the direction you want to write in. I can't explain it. It's like Bob Dylan says, I didn't write the songs, I wrote them down, So it's like that.
So in many ways, it's sort of almost like a muscle building for your non-local channel. So if most of us are just building our capacity day over day to focus on our local egoic mind, then this practice really helps you to stretch open the aperture to these other frequencies, which are available all the time, it sounds like.
All the time. We don't know how much we are connected to the infinite field that we really are. We've been programmed and conditioned to think we're just the ego personality. But when you realize, and this is what I love about teaching this course, when you realize you can tap into something that's not present in your local environment and you can get that exact target or a sense of it, this consciousness that you are is not limited to the space. And I've seen miracles. I've seen miracles in these classes where people just connect to something I would never thought they would get. Sometimes we go off planet. We've looked at, like, I had a target of the first moon landing, and someone says, well, I'm getting something very old. I'm getting steps. I'm getting shadows. And then she put it together and said, could this be? And so these ideas just pop into your head. Could this be like the Neil Armstrong moment? And so when you realize that you have this connection, you realize there's so much more to who we are as human beings. I mean, that covers a lot of the course you're doing, animal communication, mediumship. But this is a skill that can be learned and practiced. Maybe those are too, but it's a kind of linear process. It's I feel like when you start to practice this, for me, when I worked with Russell Targ, suddenly this window opened in my mind and I started to get out of my own way, stop guessing, and became available to this thing we call the signal, not the noise.
Mm-hmm. So some of it sounds like just the getting a target correct, though, like a bullseye like you had, or even like something that's kind of adjacent, is partially you're just validating or building confidence that the impressions you can get are real, it sounds like.
Right. The idea is not to guess, but and most of the time fragments come in. The first thing to do in remote viewing is to draw like an ideogram, like what they call a little picture, and you don't think about it. You sometimes let your hand go. One of the books I recommend is Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, where you're not thinking about what you're drawing. You just let this intuitive motion come through, and then you see what you got. You see what your body wants to write, and then you can tune in to that shape a little bit. It's like having confidence in what this intuitive aspect of your vehicle is receiving. And sometimes we get impressions like of people you haven't thought of in a while. I mean, this happens to everyone. Then they call that next day, or you get impressions of of something you want to learn. Suddenly you open up a book and there's this whole paragraph. We are being led by this unknown part of ourselves that is trying to make our lives better. I think that's called pronoia, you know. So the universe is in your favor, basically.
Hmm. Let's
Yeah,
talk a little bit more about the how, and I know you want to guide us in a process here. So
yeah.
how do you shift out of that more left brain, logical, egoic mind into this more diffuse, open to impression, relaxed awareness?
Well, we could do a little exercise right here. Do you want? Are
Okay,
you?
great. Let's do
I
it.
mean, the idea is that your senses are not limited to just your local awareness. So this is an exercise I do to prove that your mind, and some people call it the imagination. Some people say imagination is cognition, and that's what I believe in this. We're not using imagination, the term of a fantasy. We're using it in terms of extension of the mind. So if you close your eyes for a second, I do this in the class. So you close your eyes, take a breath, and feel your feet on the floor. Like that's you connecting to the earth or whatever floor you're sitting or standing on. So feel yourself connected. Put your attention on the bottom of your feet or wherever you're sitting. Put that attention there. So that's your body. That's the solid force of your body. Okay, now with that awareness, bring it up to the heart and just imagine, just use your mind to imagine. And in that heart, just expand that heart out into the field of the room you're in, and maybe into the town you're in, and around the planet. So you can feel yourself expanding now out of your body. Okay, so let that happen. Now, with that awareness, you could just put your hands on your chest so you remind yourself, but now put your attention at the top of your head, right at the top of your head. So you want to bring the energy up from your feet to the top of your head. Good. And you can sort of feel that room shift there. Okay, from your attention's on the top of your head. And now put your attention on the ceiling of the room you're in. Just imagine yourself up on the ceiling. That's your extrasensory awareness. Imagine you're on the ceiling. Just the best way you can. Just put your attention up there. Okay? And you can feel the room lifting. I know it's beyond the body, but you feel the room. So we're all on the ceiling now. We're all on the ceiling of whatever room you're in. Now put your attention through the ceiling on the sky above you. Just throw it up there into the sky. Good. To feel an increase of awareness. So you're out in the sky there, right? Now sense everyone else that's out there with us. And you might feel these other beings out there in that atmosphere, that sky, that blue sky or black sky. We're all up there. Just feel yourself up there. Great. You feel it like you're floating. You're in your body, but you're floating. You're floating up there. Put your attention right up there in the sky. Now just put it to the edge of the atmosphere right before we go into space. Good. Get that sense. Now, while you're up there, and you're feeling that and feeling other beings around you, other open, kind human beings. Good. Okay, now in that space, keep yourself up there. Now, open your eyes very slowly. Half open your eyes. Half like slowly, just see through like your lids a little bit. And if you can do that with a very small part of it, you can feel yourself in two places at once. You feel yourself up there, way up in the sky, and you feel yourself grounded into the body. So that's what they call here and there, both places. Your consciousness is multidimensional that way. So just get that sense of the room you're in with those very slit open eyes has also shifted, and yet you're still connected. Keep that part of you up there in the sky. Good, good, good. You can feel the shift when people do that. Now, feel the sense of your whole atmosphere around you where you're sitting changing now. Open your eyes a little more. You still might feel a little dizzy or out there. Good, because you're still connected to all that. And open your eyes a little more and take a breath. Come back to the body. Feel yourself descending through the ceiling of that room, back through the top of your head, back down to your feet. Good. Now open your eyes a little more, but you feel that lightness of being. You feel that. Hold on to that feeling, that expansion of your awareness. Good, good. Just feel yourself breathing in the body. You can open your eyes, but you might feel lightheaded, which is fine. Don't just sit there and feel that bliss. It's like you've tapped into the infinite part of yourself. And of course, we can go further in the courses, and we do. But that's your connection to the aspect of the infinite mind. You just created that. And you could say you imagined it, but you felt it. That's the difference. You felt this. So that's an exercise I like to just do. Just take, but keep floating if you want. I mean, it's just, it's powerful in a group like that. Just feel that. Good. Just feel your body breathing. Love that body of yours, the vehicle for consciousness, for experience. Drop back in. Good. Open your eyes and still feel a little spaced out there. I feel really good. How about you, Stephen?
I feel good. So are you trying to, as we re-engage each other, keep that sky mind kind of channel open? Is that the goal?
Yeah, to keep that feeling. I mean, yeah, I'd say don't drive a car if you're doing this meditation, So it's like I want to show that this is not just imaginary, but really sensing the ceiling and the sky is a real feeling. And then you want to keep that channel open as long as you want. I mean, we can just bliss out here, or we can keep going, but it's a way of showing that the mind is not local, that you can extend it beyond the body. And when you do that, you can extend it to any target someone is asking you to tune into. So instead of going out there in space, because I wasn't really using a target, you connect to the target. You feel what you feel. Jacques Vallée talks about remote viewing a target he didn't know, but he got very cold, and it was like the North Pole. So it's like,
when you're doing a target like that, how does a partner or somebody you're working with like decide what a target is, or maybe share a little bit about that so that get a sense for how to work that.
well, if you're working with someone, since I'm the monitor, I have targets that are sort of well known. I think my experience, more the target is used in a remote viewing practice, the easier it seems to get, sort of in the quantum field. But anything is a target, absolutely. It could be the house next door. It could be, I try to stay away from people a little bit, because then your mind makes all these associations. So, but it could be a city. Absolutely anything is possible. So I decide, like with outstanding shapes, I start with shapes, and then I might move to locations, and then events, and then ultimately, because I wrote this book, Making Contact, if we can get the skills, the basic skills of remote viewing down, and everyone comes pretty much online. They get, I mean, everyone can do this. I know it because I've seen it in people. And it's like everyone can play the piano. Some people can play it better. So when you get the basic skills, then one of the last exercises we do is go off planet and visit who's out there. And I mean, that's the kind of exciting.
Yeah, I remember it might be interesting just for people to hear about some experience of doing remote viewing off planet that led to something really interesting. I think that's a great example.
Well, one thing I don't recommend, which I did do with a class, is go remote view the black hole at the center of the galaxy. So I figured, okay, what's that real? And me and this woman who I'm very close with and a few other people got very dizzy and disoriented. It's like we both had that same experience. We were entering dimensional spaces that had no cognitive foundation in who we were. So I will not do that again. But most, because I do, is it's like when you have other people confirming your targets, like we went to the Pleiades and just for fun, you know. And we all saw these kind of like thin insectoid like beings that weren't at first friendly, and then they kind of warmed up to us. So a bunch of people saw the same thing, that like in most remote viewing you see the target and that's feedback that you need. But once you get that down, once the class has enough awareness, and then so we go to places that we don't have feedback. One great example, though, was Ingo Swann, who started the program. He actually coined the term remote viewing. He was asked to remote view Jupiter, and he said, "Oh yeah, there's a ring around Jupiter." And they said to him, "No, you must be looking at Saturn." And he goes, "No, I know what Saturn looks like. There is a ring around Jupiter." That was in 1973. Voyager didn't get to Jupiter till 6 years later, and they saw this ring around Jupiter. It's a very faint ring. So he needed about 6 years to make have some feedback, a confirmation on the feedback that he gave. So of course he was incredible remote viewer because he started. But you know, you can really go anywhere, anytime. Archaeological digs are great. We go back to ancient Egypt. We ask maybe how the pyramids were built. Some people, there's an agreement. Some people see stones levitating in place. That seems to be the general agreement. There'll always be some people getting a little different aspects of the target. So we're all seeing the same target in our mind's eye, but it's as if we've all seen the same movie. And I ask you, well, what was that movie about? And you say this, and I say this, and then we've seen the same thing. We've just described different features of it. So one of the things that I really love doing is taking aspects of the target and say, okay, you got this, I got this. Like in one class, this woman said, okay, I see a river, and someone else said, well, I see this arch, and someone else says, is it the Mississippi River in St. Louis? You know, I don't recommend guessing, but when you have enough aspects, and that was the target, just people intuit it. But the idea is to describe it. So I say in the classes, don't name the thing really, because naming gets you into your left brain, and you want to stay away from your left brain. Your left brain doesn't know anything. It just thinks it does. We're trying to tap into the right brain that is receiving information all the time from the field. So if we can put that ego logical mind just to sleep for a while and make yourselves available to information, impressions that seem to come from nowhere, that's more the target. And if you could just write that down, you're taking dictation from the field as it comes to you. And then after all the information is there, and some people, you know, in some remote viewing courses, they write 30 pages on one target. You know, it's like you could write 1,000 words about one image. So but when you get most of the information and we look at everyone's different aspects, then we do what the CIA did. Okay, you got this like this. What do we got here, folks? And that's a really fun part. I mean, maybe we could do some of that breakout room classes and just put different impressions together, because that's where it becomes real for me. you know?
Amazing. Do you want to share a little bit more about, you talked about how this can be used for creativity, also like timelining into your own future, maybe a little bit about like your own personal manifestation applications too.
My own personal experiences, you mean, what I've had with that?
Well, just a little bit, maybe some examples or how you can just channel this skill towards the
Right.
creation of that which you're here to create.
Right. So, I like to write. I wrote this book, Making Contact, and I was got to a place where I didn't know where to go forward to kind of create more emphasis on some points. So I just sat there, and these ideas came to me, and I just jotted down these ideas. And this creative mind is always accessing where we're intending it. So when I just sat with the basic ideas, I got more information that I didn't have before. I can't tell you where it came from, but where does creativity come from? Where it's a practice. The more you can listen to those inner voices, the inspiration that's coming to you, like some people write down whole songs because they get this flow. There's there's a really funny talk by Elizabeth Gilbert. She talks about the genie and the genius, and she talks about Tom Waits is in a car in Los Angeles, and he hears this song coming into his head while he's driving, and he says, he shouts out, "Can't you see I'm driving here?" Like, wait a minute, but inspiration comes when you make yourself available to it. So you clear the ego mind, you clear your expectations, and this is what you have to do in remote viewing. And what Russell told me, and this was so key, you let that surprising thing pop into your awareness. Not the recycled monkey mind thoughts, but what is coming out of nowhere that wants to feed you, tell you information, that wants to give you a gift of a greater awareness. So a teacher I had said, we're here to make known the unknown. And that's everything that is yet to be created. So my ultimate vision is that we are here to create. That's why we've incarnated into this plane. And so the more we're available to this, everything around us in this cultural world has been created because someone had an idea to build a wall or window, paint that color, or plant that tree. All the creation is feeding us. And the more we're available to that, the more we can get out of the old ruts of the known and start to activate new ideas. Terence McKenna, I'll just share. Terence McKenna, who was one of my favorite speakers, said, if the artist can't find the way cannot be found. So when we make ourselves available to creative inputs of whatever sorts, maybe you're a lecturer, maybe you're a dancer, maybe you're a singer. I mean, how did the Beatles write all those amazing songs? Well, it came to them. It's like, we are here to do that. We're here to manifest creation in our intention of interacting with this unlimited, infinite field. And that field, if we stop thinking for a minute and stop the internal dialogue, it's always feeding us. It really is. We're surfing on the wave of forever here. And remote viewing helps us access this by getting all the stuff we think we know, our identity, our lineage, our names, our what we do, anything we're identified with, out of the way. And when you're present, I think there's a saying by Jesus, when you're present, everything else is known. That's what we want to do here.
Let's talk a little bit about blocks and barriers that people have internally to being able to open in this way. What are some of the most common ones, and how do you work with them?
One of the most common ones is called an AOL, an analytical overlay. So let's see. Okay, I was remote viewing something and I got this shape and I said, oh, it must be a plant, because your mind, your left brain wants to always be in control. So if your awareness is feeding something, it says, look, we got this one. It's a plant. It's a plant because that's that shape. And then when I finally saw the target, it wasn't that at all. It was this kind of spoke-like thing. But So the associations is what you have to be aware of, how the left brain really loves to make associations all the time. And the right brain just gets pure awareness that doesn't need to be interpreted. So one of the things I tell people not to do is name it. Don't name it, describe it. Describe the adjectives, the color, the shape, the size, the motion, adjectives and verbs. As soon as you name something, it is dead. It is like dead, and you think that's what it is. It's what I call, we live in a semantic reality, not an actual interface with the world. We know, okay, that's a tree in front of us. You call it a tree, and that's all it will ever be. But if you don't name that thing out there and you just see it as a being, yes, of course it's a tree. But if you step back and you say, okay, that's not just a tree, that is like a living being, or that's a being, then there's an exchange. This is how the Native Americans live. There's an exchange of information where the semantic overlays of language don't get attached to the objects in the world. And because language is so it's so much a part of us, we live in this very logical world where we know what things are. And what I say is, don't know, and or don't logically think about it, but allow pure knowing to come in of the awareness. So describing actions, this is why the Native Americans gave themselves names like running bear. They're actions, they're not things. Or so if we can stop listening to the left brain that really wants to control every aspect of our world and become available to shape, sizes, descriptive, that's one pitfall that we can avoid.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Do you have any other stories from your own life of things that have opened in kind of like remarkable ways as a result of doing remote viewing around it?
Yeah, I used to live in New York. Sometimes I still do, and I would always feel which way to go. I would like, all these streets, but I wouldn't necessarily walk the same streets all the time. And I would come upon film productions actually everywhere I went. This was like in the 80s. I would see, oh, there's a film being made. And, I would hanging out on the street watching the film being made, and then because I trusted that intuitive feeling, I was asked to be in a movie, a big Hollywood movie as background. So that's just one sample of just following that intuitive sense of the world, like get away from the habits of thinking. What else would I do with remote viewing that would be a good sample for you? Well, it's like trusting your intuition. Like one time, I always go to this restaurant in New York, and one time I was feeling like, oh, I really don't want to go there. Just getting, no, I shouldn't go there. But I said to myself, look, I'm hungry. I know what I want there. So I sat down and I ordered some food, and the guy next to me had this awful cold that I ended up getting because that voice was saying, you don't need to go there. But I was arguing with it and saying, no, I really want to go there. So there's the drive of that intuitive, still small voice gets stronger in people because you've done this remote viewing targets where that window is more open. So you get in touch with, let's call it your higher self, your intuitive voice, and you learn to listen to it, or you get that lesson that, so that's one example that is practical in a way.
Well, I mean, it's so fascinating, everything you're sharing here today. And I know we can go deeper down a lot of different dimensions of this, but I want to spend some time talking about how people can really learn these protocols from you and practice together in a group field, which is really the most empowering way to do this work.
Yeah.
So Ellen's agreed to teach this brand new course for Shift. It's the first time we've ever done a remote viewing course, which even though it's one of the most studied phenomena, we haven't really gotten out a full program on this. So Alan's really going to be breaking new ground for us and opening up this horizon of the possible. with this course. It's called Transcend Time and Space with Remote Viewing. Expand your non-local consciousness to experience your infinite nature. You can find it at the URL transcendspaceandtime.com, transcendspaceandtime.com. It's a 7-week program. You don't need to have any background in this. So it's really just if you're curious, you want to explore, want to see whether you can do it, whether maybe you've already built skills and you want to hone them as well. So Alan, I'd love for you to share in your own words about some of your intentions for what people will come away with from this course, and then we'll go through the modules.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah, okay, we can go. Well, what I hope people come away with is to know how infinite they really are, how that we're not this little person in this body, but our capacity to know more of creation is just waiting for this awareness to come online. We've been so conditioned to think we're just this local being, and what people discover and get so excited about, and they don't know really how it happens, but the world starts talking to them. Trees start talking to them. Things. Sometimes I get the feeling like, oh, these shoes want to come with me on vacations. Like everything becomes alive in a sense, and because we're not locked into a very limited sense of ourselves anymore. That's part of the miracles people discover here. And I love that part, to see people come more alive. And right? I mean,
that's great. Yeah. It's all about coming more alive and really accessing our higher abilities. So module 1 is called Foundations of Remote Viewing, harnessing the power of infinite awareness to become more intuitive, emotionally sensitive, creative, and wise.
Well, in that first module, I like to give a little bit of history, but also understand the difference between these dual processors of the brain we have. We have this left brain, which is really logical and really linear and mechanistic, and the right brain, which is connected, like I've been saying, to the infinite field. The problem is, by the time we're 5 or 6 years old, we learn ABC 1, 2, 3. Everything gets locked in, and we start to think that's the only world. So by understanding there's another way to process reality that's based on gnosis, pure knowing, as opposed to logos, logic, we understand that there is another part, there's another half of our whole possibilities that we've been ignoring. And the Native Americans say you can't fly with one wing. You need both parts of the brain. So there's also, sometimes I talk about this video by Jill Bolte Taylor, where she had lost part of her left brain. She became pure right brain, pure presence, pure awareness. And she connected to this collective field of infinite being. And then she's also this other part, this individual. So it's not to be one part of your brain or the other, but we need to be whole brains. It's just that our left brain has been overly exercised, that we forgot this other part of ourselves.
Absolutely. Module 2, make your remote viewing experiences reliable and repeatable with formal protocols.
Okay, so I go into the actual steps. There's basically 6 steps that we do when we start this practice. This is what the CIA learned, and what Ingo Swann, the founder, really laid out for people developing a protocol. We sit there, you clear your mind, and you breathe, and you get present, and then I say there's a target, put your intention on that target, and then you just let yourself draw what they call an ideogram, and then you describe it with adjectives and verbs. And then you go a little deeper in, because sometimes people reach an impasse, and then you go back into that centered place and you remote view the thing you've just drawn, and you are led deeper into that target of awareness. So that's a basic understanding. I mean, there's a lot more to that we can go into. So yeah.
Module 3, focus on detail and location in your remote viewing practices to recognize phenomena you've never seen before.
Right. In this course, I make a big distinction between cognition and recognition. Do you know the difference, Stephen?
Why don't you explain it?
Recognition means to recognize. So you have to have cognition in order to recognize something. How does cognition take place? Well, your parents showed you a picture of a horse and you got this pattern of a horse, and suddenly you saw a horse and then you recognized it. So by recognizing new patterns of awareness, you start to tap into, you get out of the name, but you can start to describe. So these images are coming into our mind all the time, but the idea is to recognize what is the new image, what is the unknown, what are you accessing that you may not have, you don't have a name for. And the idea is to just describe that, because that's usually the signal. People say, I don't know where this is coming from, but this is what I'm getting. Boom, you've gotten it.
So makes total sense. Module 4, activate new levels of imagination to access subtle information during remote viewing.
Right. So when we drop into that space, maybe sometimes we'll have somebody, maybe they're in a process, they're stuck in some creative process or something. It's like you could think about that, and you just let what your ideas of where you want it to go, and let the creative action direct you. It's like, because we're interfacing with this infinite flow of forever, we have to let go of our fixed ideas on what's happening and allow us to interface with this flow of forever. And when you do, new avenues of creativity open up, and new possibilities and information. And sometimes you say things you don't know where they came from, but you say in a way that feels grounded and complete.
Module 5, move beyond concrete thinking and into the symbolic nature of perception to become a highly skilled remote viewer.
Right. So the world out there is representative of a deeper space of being. So yeah, you see a tree, you see a window, but what's the essence of that thing? How do you tap into something beyond the visual? How do you tap into the essential nature of something? So you can remote view a target, but then I ask people to go into the tasking. That's something called, what is the purpose of that? And that's something that the CIA did too. What is the purpose of this target? What is the reason for its existence? And you start to feel, you get more information on a deeper level than just the physical thing. That's what I'm saying here. You're accessing essence. Right?
Module 6, apply remote viewing protocols to explore past and future events.
Right. So once we have that first 5 modules and we're really developing the skill to tap into our infinite awareness, our right brain, then we go to like the past or the future. I like to do the past first. So I go to a target. I don't want to name anything now, because then people watching will think that's the target. So some event that happened in the past, or some archaeological place, or some excavating. You see what is there. What was the purpose of this? Like, okay, I'll take the pyramids. When was that built? How was it built? Who built it? And what was the purpose? All that information, when you've really trained yourself, starts to come online within your consciousness field. And how that happens, that's the miracle here. Where's this coming from? Well, we fine-tune our awareness to tap into the target that we're pointing to, and then information just flows in. I mean, sometimes that takes a bit of practice, but it can happen. There's future forecasting that Dick Argyle does with the Hawaii remote viewing group. So it's tapping into the essence and the tasking of those targets. That's what gets exciting.
Great. What an awesome program. And Module 7 goes into expand your remote viewing practice to include cosmic and non-human targets.
Right. So when we're really skilled, and I ask people to practice during the week. There's some applications. There's something called RV Tournament that helps us like practice, and there's other practice with a partner. When you can really understand the nature of your own awareness and what is your left brain talking garbage, nonsense, the recycled and what is really clear. This is part of what I really like to do, that clear flow of the field coming into you. Then we go off planet and we visit civilizations. We see what messages do they have for us here on Earth? And yeah, maybe you think it, you're imagining it, but if everyone gets the same message, that's the sort of feedback that's like, oh, seeing the picture of what the target was. So
Hmm.
it's happened. It's
It's
happened.
exciting.
It's amazing. That's actually that's actually how the government is tuning into these UFOs here. They're using remote viewers to see what's out there. And that's been documented. Yeah.
So much can be revealed in this process. So the URL for this whole course is at transcendspaceandtime.com, transcendspaceandtime.com. So there's more on each of the modules that Alan just described. And on the page, I also want to say that there's more information. If you choose to join, you'll get not only the 7 90-minute live sessions with Alan, which have just been described, you also get recordings for every session with video and audio. You get word-for-word transcripts. There's weekly practices for home. That's really important to build the skill set. There's also a Facebook community to deepen your experiences, share what you're learning, and also just create a supportive matrix to keep developing the skills. And you also have some small group time to connect with other participants. On the page, you also see there's a number of extra bonuses that are each designed to enhance the journey for you. There's a PDF of the complete introduction in Alan's book, Making Contact. It's called ETs and Preparing for a New Reality. This is actually a whole, and we've touched on a little bit, but there's a lot that Alan could go into in this. But I want to share a little bit about the PDF from the introduction.
Well, I have to say also about that last module that I call it remote viewing for making contact. So because this is the book I wrote, and it's not just making contact with ETs, it's making contact with yourself. It's making contact with each other. How do we drop into that deeper space to make contact? So the bonus is this is the long bonus. This is actually a collection of 12 essays by people I consider the best in the field. And the key to contact is consciousness. So what we'll be discovering in this course is how to use your consciousness as an application. So the introduction gives an overview of all the different ways we can make contact, written by experts, written by people like Linda Moulton Howe and Whitley Strieber and Grant Cameron and JJ and Desiree Hurtak there. They've all contributed one aspect of this, how consciousness, which I think is actually not local, it's not local to human beings, it's a fabric of creation itself, can be used to interface with other consciousnesses. This is ultimately the highest point of making contact. So this is a little introduction to that.
Great stuff. There's also a second bonus. There's a video with commentary by Alan on Connect in the Desert. That's all on the ET mindset.
Yeah.
And there's finally a third bonus that is your special bonus if you sign up right away by midnight tonight Pacific time. This is actually a rare interview with Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's beloved in our movement. It's a video on tapping into the quantum field. You want to share a little bit more about that special bonus?
Yeah. I have to say, I've known Joe before he was a teacher. I knew him when he was at the Rampa School teaching, and we were, colleagues there. And I saw him really rise up in the world, but I was able to get a really early interview with him. I guess that was 90 something, whenever. But he sat down with me and started to lay out his program that would then be developed into these incredible courses. But he talked to me about the creative action and some of the ideas I put out here. We both learned at this mystery school we were part of. So it was a really fluid conversation, and I haven't posted that yet on YouTube. I have a very popular YouTube channel, but I've been saving that, so I figured I'd make that available because it goes back to 2015. When does it 2000 something, when Joe was just starting out? So you get see this early development of Joe's teachings in the world.
Very cool. Well, that's your special bonus if you sign up by midnight tonight. So it's clearly going to be such a groundbreaking program and so illuminating in terms of information and practice. There's more detail again at transcendspaceandtime.com. We've kept the investment very accessible for this program. It's just 3 payments of $128, or you save 10% when you pay in full up front with 1 payment of $349. The course is going to begin July 9th and run Wednesdays at 9 Pacific, noon Eastern. But even if you can't make the live times, you can still get the full value with recordings and the transcripts in the community as well. There's some great extra testimonials on the page for people who've worked with Alan. So you're in really good hands, and he's been really at the forefront of this research for some time. And I think you're going to open up some incredible new and exciting doorways of your own potential.
Right.
So again, it's all at transcendspaceandtime.com.
You know, the exciting thing about this course is that you learn about your own mind. You learn how your consciousness works. You learn how it's limited and how it's unlimited. And when you can start to tap into the unlimited part, which is available to absolutely everyone when they know how to access this, people realize what miracles their lives really are. And that's the most exciting thing, is to watch people see the infinite nature of their own existence. Like they're, you know, in the near-death experience or the out-of-body experience, we realize we're beyond the body. But here, you're in the body, realizing you're beyond the body. And that's something that's really unique to this field.
Well, thank you for your pioneering efforts, and thank you for bringing this course forward and your wisdom today, Alan. Really, I love what you're up to, so thank you, and thank you all for joining. If you'd like to go further into Alan's full new course, you can do so at Transcend Space and Time, and you'll get that special Joe Dispenza interview if you sign up today. So thank you so much, all. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.